Hello, this is Stan Lubeck. Welcome to Coaching Pit Stop. Today we're going to do a book summary of Bill O'Reilly's recent book, Confronting the Presidents. You know, it's full of shocking insights about these men who are some of the most powerful men in the world, and yet many of them are very flawed individuals, and shockingly so. And so there's a reason why this book has been on the New York Times #1 best-selling list since publication. And I think you'd enjoy reading it, but I just want to give you 5 of my most shocking insights from the book. Here it is.
Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
Okay, so the first shocking insight that I want to talk about from this book is what I call family dysfunctions. And this is true of a couple of the presidents, but probably all of them. But the two most start with our founding father, George Washington. He's at the top of our list of great presidents, and yet his mother, Mary Washington, was George's most prominent critic. There she is. She doesn't look like a real happy person, does she? But she never complimented her son on his battle victories and service to our country, but was always asking for more money. She was addicted to money. Maybe it was because when her husband died, the inheritance went to George to manage, and but however much money he gave to her, even though he didn't have much because he spent it all trying to win the war, she was never happy. And George and Martha were embarrassed by her addiction to money and sacrificed greatly to care for her, but she was never satisfied. The second dysfunctional family character that I want to talk about is Thomas Jefferson. Some critics label Thomas Jefferson a godless atheist for a reason, and still others consider him a radical bent on tearing apart the national fabric. In fact, George Washington's wife, Martha Washington, she called his election to the presidency the second worst day of her life after the death of her husband, George. Pretty fascinating. Well, why would she think so poorly of poor old Thomas Jefferson? Well, he was a scoundrel. He owned 700 slaves, and he considered slavery to be necessary at that time in the history of the United States. But the second thing is, one of his slaves, Sally Hemings, was 30 years younger than Thomas, and she gave birth to 6 of his offspring. And Thomas Jefferson never confessed to this evil. Pretty sad, isn't it? Well, let's talk about, secondly, unpublished scandals. You know, in our day, everything gets published. Back in the day, nothing got published, and some of these presidents got away with murder. Consider Grover Cleveland. Before running for president of the United States, Grover was a sheriff. And as a sheriff, he raped a young lady named Maria Halpin. He admitted to the crime, but like many people say today, it was consensual. Right, I'm sure it was. He was a sheriff. So 6 weeks later, she informed him that she is pregnant, and she's requesting that Grover marry her to make the child legitimate. Well, Grover wasn't going to have anything to do with that. In fact, what he ended up doing was he took that child, and he did name the child after himself, Oscar Folsom Cleveland. He then arranges to have the child forcibly removed from Maria and really covered up and give an extra pizzazz to it. He sends her to the Providence Lunatic Asylum. 10 years later, Grover was elected president of the United States. Well, what about Ike Eisenhower? This one's kind of fascinating because everybody loves Ike Eisenhower. He was a general during World War II, a hero, carried all kinds of responsibilities. He was promoted to 4 stars, and when he was assigned a beautiful 35-year-old Irish woman to drive him around England. And here's what's fascinating. A reporter commented, "I have never before seen a chauffeur get out of the car and kiss the general good morning when he comes from his office." Well, Ike, this isn't very well known, but Ike made a military request to his superior in command, that was General Marshall, to divorce his wife, Mamie, and marry this young lady.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Of course, his request was denied, and he was told that it would ruin his career. And Well, how about shocking presidential habits? Look at this guy, John Quincy Adams. He had quite a schedule. Here's what he would do. Every day he'd rise, usually between 4 and 5. That's good. Get up early in the morning. He'd walk 2 miles. Good for him. He'd bathe in the Potomac and walk home, which occupies 2 hours. He writes, then describes a morning spent having breakfast, reading, writing, only stepping into the office shortly after noon. But here's what's most fascinating about him. When he took that bath in the Potomac River, he was skinny dipping. And nearly every morning he was skinny dipping in the Potomac River. And long after his presidential duties were complete, John Quincy Adams writes about sliding into the Potomac in the buff at the age of 78. Could you imagine if the newspapers today got a hold of that? A few pictures and his career would have been over, but that was another day, I guess. Well, here's kind of a hilarious one. This one is number 4. Shocking White House duties. When Benjamin Harrison was in office, electricity was new and lighting the White House was new. And like this says, Benjamin Harris hired Ike Hoover to turn the lights on and off in the White House. That was his primary job. What a pretty cush job, if you ask me. But the president and first lady were terrified of electrocution. So when Ike Hoover was away, they didn't want to risk death, so they let the lights blaze all night long. Shocking. They didn't even have green energy in those days. Well, how about the 5th one? And this is kind of a category because I'm going to list a few of the presidents underneath this one. And this is what I call shocking presidential affairs. This is nothing new, but Warren Harding, anybody who evaluates Warren, he was one of the worst presidents ever in the history of the United States. He took advantage financially of his office. He had some buddies of his that would come and play cards and hang out and drink, and they all benefited financially. But the other thing was that he had numerous affairs, fathering a daughter out of wedlock while using the Secret Service to facilitate his sexual activities in the West Wing. Boy, nobody really heard a whole lot about that because in that day, the newspapers really didn't publish that kind of information. But another guy, Franklin Roosevelt, we appreciate all that he did to help us get through World War II. But while he was in office, he had several extramarital affairs. His daughter, Anna, secretly facilitated an affair with Lucy Mercer, who was with FDR when he died. In fact, Eleanor knew about it. So, one of the artifacts from Roosevelt's time in office got shipped from Eleanor to Lucy Mercer just to let her know that she knew about their affair. John Kennedy was even worse than Bill Clinton in our day. He had numerous affairs during his presidency. Lyndon Johnson, who wasn't exactly a clean president as well, but he just called him the Playboy. And we know about Marilyn Monroe, but that was just one of many extramarital affairs, including an intern that was 19 years old that he seduced. He asked her if she wanted to go swimming, and she says, "No, I don't have a swimming suit." "Well, we'll get you a swimming suit." So he got her to swim in the pool in the White House, and then after that, after she swam in the pool, then he took her upstairs and seduced her. Pretty sad. Most of us know about Bill Clinton, but even before he was in office, while he was governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton ordered state troopers to find women for him, book a room, and stand watch outside. This was before he became president. This behavior led to, we know about Jennifer Flowers and Paula Jones and Monica Lewinsky, but Clinton's blatant lies led to his impeachment trials. And of course, it was a national embarrassment. Tragically, his lack of personal character tarnished his significant presidential accomplishments, which were remarkable in many ways because, unemployment dropped to post-World War II levels. Inflation was the lowest in 30 years. But impeachment overwhelmed President Clinton. Thus, his accomplishments are shrouded by his dubious personal conduct.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
So what are my takeaways from these 5 shocking elements that I learned from the book? Well, first of all, our presidents are human. Many were corrupt, many were alcoholics, many cheated on their wives. I'm just reminded at the Constitutional Convention of 1787, the critical question was not who should be president, or who should lead us, or who is the wisest among us, who should be the best king. No, the country's founding fathers concentrated on such a question as what processes can we create to give us good presidents long after we're dead and gone. So it's not just how do we pick a good president, but how do we cultivate, how do we build young men or women that one day could be president of the United States? I think that's a great question. That is the critical question to this day. How are we grooming the next president of the United States to be a leader of character, with heart, to serve the people with honor and courage, integrity and selflessness? What should next generation leaders today know? Who should they be? And what should they do? You know, it used to be that the Eagle Scouts might be a good option for preparing leaders for the future, but, you know, that doesn't seem to be the best pathway today. But I'd like to think that somehow the churches of our day and pastors of our day would have a vision to build into young men and women to have the world's greatest youth ministry, not just feeding them pizza and having concerts, but really developing them as leaders, taking the best leaders in the church and having them pour into these young people so that one day they might be leaders that could lead our country into a preferable future. And, you know, I think maybe Bill O'Reilly should write another book called Confronting the Pastors, because I'm not sure there's that many pastors who are thinking about creating next generation leaders. Maybe they are, but, you know, be sure if you know of a pastor that's doing that today and you're excited and proud about what they're doing, be sure and put it in the notes in the comments. I'd love to check out that church and see what that pastor is doing to help us with leadership in the future. So I love this purpose statement. Maybe this is a purpose statement that churches should have. We are building a high-performing team of the most spiritual people in our church to create healthy spiritual environments that will lead people into life-changing relationship with Jesus while being equipped as leaders to transform our community and beyond. We dream of the next Billy Graham or the next President of the United States coming out of our ministry as we give every person tools and resources to become world-impacting disciples of Jesus. We exist to present Jesus' life-transforming message to every person. We lead people to Jesus, build them up in the faith, and empower them to change the world. Wouldn't that be a great purpose statement for the church today? To develop the kinds of leaders that we need to address the unbelievably challenging issues that are current in our world today. Let me encourage you to read the book Confronting the Presidents for an entertaining experience on the frailties of human leadership. So God's best to you. Bye for now.